Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time to do the Week 3 UFL Power Rankings. This past week was a really good week of football. Every single game came right down to the wire, and you could make a very good case that in at least 3 of the games, the team that played worse ended up winning. So this was a very, well, in theory, a difficult Power Rankings to make, but in all honesty, this was the easiest so far for me. I will say it differs a lot from the general consensus, but I think the general consensus is very flawed, so I'll get to that. But naturally, we're going to start this off. But first, before we get into it, I want to thank you all for 700 subscribers. We just hit that milestone. I'm going to put a community post out on that as well. It's a huge milestone, and we're on the way to 800. Remember, I am doing a 1,000 subscriber giveaway once we hit it. I'm giving away, at the moment, 3 USFL Upper Deck box sets, as well as 2 AAF blaster boxes, and potentially more. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. And of course, the extracurricular thing we're doing today is each team's biggest weakness 2 weeks into the season. So without further ado, let's get started with number 8, the Houston Roughnecks. The Roughnecks come in at number 8, and this really shouldn't be a shock. Number 1 and number 8 are pretty much set in stone at this point until either the 8 team wins or the 1 team loses, and the Roughnecks are number 8. Look, when you look at what they did against the Defenders, it was just pretty, again, it was very much just like the 22 Gamblers. Look, I made that analogy last week, and it proved even more true this week. As you had 4 standout performances, Reuben Foster had another great game. Chris Odom looked incredible in his first game back. 3 TFLs and half a sack. Ethan Westbrooks really was good this week. 1.5 sacks and 2 TFLs. But Corn Elder's 96-ish yard pick 6, that was crazy. Now, the one thing that is important to note is the fact that Jarrett Garantano ended up getting hurt. In fact, from what the most recent reports suggest, he will be out for a month. And is allowed for Reed Sinnett to come into the field and play. And let's just put it very simply, he looked a lot better than Garantano did. So, in a sad way, this is a good thing for the Roughnecks, because instead of forcing Jarrett to play when he really has not looked good at all, we now have Reed Sinnett, who did look solid. He didn't look incredible, but he looked good. Now, of course, the big issue with this team is that once again their rushing was pretty lackluster. Even though, yes, 4.3 average is really solid, the issue is that they only rushed the ball 11 times with TJ Pledger. And when you get rid of the 10-yard one, it's still a solid one. If you get rid of the 10 yards, it's 10 attempts for 37 yards, which is still solid 3.7. But if you're only running the ball 11 times with your best running back, it's not really you're doing a lot of damage on the run. This is a game that statistically was very close. There were some differences. The 3rd down and 4th down conversions were in favor of the Defenders, but the yards per play were in favor of the Roughnecks. In the end, the Roughnecks had a chance to win this game. They had a last-second drive that was very much aided by the Defenders and a very poor decision on a timeout call by Reggie Barlow. But in the end, the Roughnecks couldn't capitalize and they lost the game and stay at number 8. Now, their biggest weakness is very clearly their rushing attack. Look, their offense is just putrid. It is the worst rushing attack in the entire league. And the issue isn't even because they can't, get yardage, because they're actually 4th in yards per rush. That's a very, very solid stat to be at. The issue is they're only running the ball 13 times a game. Look, half of what makes a rushing attack good isn't just your yards per rush, it's how many times you are running the ball. The more you are running the ball, the more clock you're taking, the more time you have the ball. And the fact is, they're not even like they're playing behind in this case. Look, if you're down by 1 score, you can run the ball all you want. Yes, naturally the final drive, you have a certain time limit. But the fact that throughout the entire game when your running back, like I said, was averaging a solid yard per carry, you only ran it with him 11 total times, that's pretty bad. And this is really bad as well as the first down percentage. That is essentially the percentage of every time you run the ball, how often is it for a first down. They're tied for last in the league at 15.4%. So, you're not even doing good there. So, it's a really bad rushing attack. And yes, part of this is because they don't have the most mobile of QBs. But the big issue is, of course, that they don't have Mark Thompson. Hopefully when he comes back, which hopefully is this next week, it'll be a huge boost for them. But at the moment, it's just their rushing attack leaves a lot to be desired because they're not utilizing it at all. And so if you're not going to utilize it, it is a weakness. If you only have, 92 yards across 2 games, we just saw Mateo Durant have over 100 yards in 1 game, and that's 1 player. This is a really bad stat line, so Roughnecks need to, at the very least, just run the ball more. Because, again, they're already running it efficiently. 3.5 yards might not be great by any means, and it's just but it's still better than a lot of other teams in the league. And the other team's rushing attack, while technically not being as efficient, it's better because they're running the ball more. So, that's their biggest weakness. Now, number 7 is the DC Defenders. Now, This is one that I think should be a general consensus, but for some reason people really get caught up in the fact they have a win and that's supposed to guarantee them out of the bottom two. Look, power rankings is not a standings. It is how good a team is. Is Team A better than Team B? DC is the second worst team in the league. Look, they barely beat a team that was a consensus bottom. Look, almost every single power rankings I saw anywhere, whether it be on Reddit, whether it be on X, whether it be on YouTube, the Defenders and Roughnecks were the bottom two in almost all of them. And if they weren't, they were bottom three because that's DC at 6 and they had like the Renegades at 7. So DC beating the Roughnecks in a close, tight-knit game with the DC Defenders almost through does not justify them moving up above other teams that kept it close against actually good teams. Look, the DC Defenders, like I said, statistically was almost a dead even heat. Okay, we're talking less than 2 minute different time of possession. We're talking about just a couple differences in the third down percentage. Even sacks and TFLs were close. 2 sacks for 9 yards versus 1 sack of 8 yards. 6 TFLs versus 7. It was close. The fact is that DC should have lost this game, arguably. Essentially, they called a timeout for no reason before a 2 minute warning, which gave Curtis Johnson a free timeout, which allowed the Roughnecks to almost win the game. Look, DC was able to make some good stops on the Roughnecks. One of the Roughnecks' touchdowns was a pick 6. So their defense did a lot better than what the score suggests. Very much, kind of like last week against the Brahmas, where the score makes it seem like the defense was horrid, which, granted, it still was pretty bad, like I said. But the defense stepped it up a bit. Granted, you played the Roughnecks offense, so did you really step up or did you just, play mediocre? But the offense, once again, had the same issue. You're really missing your big players. You're missing Lucky Jackson. You're missing Abram Smith. Those two guys not being here, one due to him going to the NFL, one of them due to, getting hurt. You're really missing them. Jordan Teamo could only do so much with a receiving core whose best receiver is probably Kiki Kuti, and whose best running back is, Cameron Harris? Look, their rushing game was horrid. Look, if you just glance at the stats, you think 3.8, that's solid. When you eliminate the 24-yard rush that Cameron had, that is 8 attempts for 10 yards. That is how you have to view that. You have to subtract the long, and that's how you get how good he actually played. So Cameron Harris actually was horrid. And then Higgins was somehow even worse. Well, they're both pretty bad. If you get rid of his 12-yard rush, 17 yards and 10 attempts, 1.7, oh my God. Look, they were just terrible rushing the ball again. Yet, they got the W. Barely. They didn't really deserve it. They weren't that good a team. They are still clearly a bottom 2 team, and they have to win against a team that's not Houston to justify moving up. Because, look, you can't just go out there, lose to the Brahmas because your defense was terrible and your right tackle was bad. And so at that point, you could say, oh, it's fluky. The defenders really aren't that bad. But then when you go up against the Roughnecks, yes, the Roughnecks defense is incredible. They have a lot of high-end talent. But this rushing attack already didn't look good against the Brahmas, and now didn't look good against the Roughnecks. It just probably isn't good. Your receiving core probably isn't good, which sadly, both those things are things I predicted. I said in the RB room video a while back that the DC Defenders room was terrible. It was just that they had an incredible starter. And I said in the wide receiver room ranking that their receiving room is a massive downgrade from last year. Sadly, those things are both turning out to be true. There's only so much Teamo can do if his whole team has been massively downgraded and hamstrung from what they were last year. So, at this point, I am very skeptical in the Defenders. I would say that they are probably 2 weeks away from that they're done. If they end up losing the next 2 games, I would say it's safe to say they're probably going to miss the playoffs, barring a huge signing of a big-name running back. Get Reggie Corbin out of retirement, something like that. If they don't do that, I would be very, very scared if I'm a Defenders fan. Now, coming in as their biggest weakness is the rushing offense. Yeah, I know, they just played the Roughnecks, and it's the same weakness, except theirs is a bit different. Yes, in attempts, they're solid. In yards, not so much. 4th in attempts, 6th in yards, you don't want to be that. You want it to be the other way around or even. 3rd and first down percentage, that's good. But your 3.2 yards per rush is the second worst in the league, and you only have 1 rushing touchdown, which is naturally, low. Yeah. Look, it's pretty weak. And again, just like we said before, even their rushing yards and all that and rushing average, we're only 2 weeks into the season. It's a big reason why I'm not using season-long stats for, the opening image of each team. Look, if you eliminate their big rushes they had this past week, the 12-yard and the 24-yard rush, it gets even worse. So this rushing attack is really bad, okay? So, guess what? You lost the guy that was the best running back in the XFL conference by a country mile, or in the XFL last year by a country mile, and you expected your running game to still be strong. Yeah, that's a mistake. They should have definitely tried to get somebody else instead of just believing what they had was going to work. It is very clear they need Abram Smith, and they ain't going to get him back. So the rushing attack is easily their weakness, and and technically it is worse than the Roughnecks rushing attack. It's just the Roughnecks don't utilize it enough, whereas DC just isn't good. So yes, DC number 7 biggest weakness, rushing offense. And number 6 is going to be the Arlington Renegades. Look, I think some people were kind of skeptical I put them as high as I did, and I picked them to beat the Battlehawks, and you could very much make the case they were the better team against the Battlehawks, and that I was right to have faith in them. They essentially lost because they missed a field goal with like 2 minutes left. Granted, and this is why I say that I'm not keeping the Renegades above the Battlehawks, because the Battlehawks also did miss a field goal early in the game. Wasn't clutch, but it still was a big deal. If you give both their field goals, naturally the Battlehawks win. And of course, there's a question on the Renegades should have let the Battlehawks score. Questionable coaching by Bob Stoops. They should have let them score. Granted, it would have seen how good Beck did coach his guys on whether or not they would stop short or they would go into the end zone. Instead, he actually played hard defense, and guess what? They lost. So yes, poor coaching decisions made by Bob Stoops at that point. Instead of, there's only so much you can do. If there's if there's 30 seconds left and you have no way to really get the ball back, maybe you should just try and let them score. What's 3 yards going to be a difference? Well, I say that granted, Jeff Fisher lost the game for the Panthers based on literally 1 yard on a kick, but I digress. The point is, the Renegades defense did not look that good again. 344 yards allowed is horrid. And then, of course, the fact they once again were efficient on third down, 6 of 11, which was a hell of a lot better than the 3 of 10 the Battlehawks had, but the Battlehawks went 2 of 3 on fourth down percentage. They averaged a hell of a lot more yards per play at 6.9. Marcel Aitman ate like a beast, and so did Mateo Durant, both for the Battlehawks. Whereas the Renegades Luis Perez looked great. Again, Luis Perez is still proving that he is not just a game manager, he is a very, very good quarterback. 72 completion percentage, 233 yards. Granted, it's the college quarterback rating, but, a 151 passer rating for college is still really good. That's still over 100 in the NFL. It's just, they got beat. This was a very tight game. Again, you can make the case the Renegades were the better team. I don't think they were. I think the Battlehawks were the better team, but you can make an argument. And you can make a case that it was just the last 2 minutes that cost the Renegades, missing a 46-yard field goal, which is very doable. And then, of course, the just horrid coaching decision to just try and stop the Battlehawks when they're already in the red zone. So yeah, they lost, but they're at number 6. The fact is that they played the Stallions to a draw at the half and then just got beat in the second half, and they were able to keep it very close against the Battlehawks, who kept it close against the Panthers, who also kept it close against the Stallions. So essentially, if they were to play any team, I think that they would beat the Roughnecks and the Defenders. There's no reason why I shouldn't believe that. The Renegades deserve to be higher than both DC and Houston. That's why they're number 6. Their biggest weakness is their defense, and it's just their defense as a whole. Look, I didn't show it, but their turnovers are also pretty lackluster, but their main defense is the problem. They are by far the most in points allowed. They're the only team allowed more than 40. They are literally last in the big 4 defensive stats. Points allowed, yards allowed, passing yards allowed, and rush yards allowed. That is horrid. I mean, you're talking about you're last in all of those stats, and especially yards per game, it's dead last, even rushing yards per game. This is a team that's defense is being very bad. Look, I said it before, this is a team that looked very mid, and it still feels that way. It's like if you beat the Renegades, you're a contender. If you lose them, you're not, and that's because this defense is just proving not to be good. It is a defense that struggles because it doesn't have as many big-name players as it needs. So if you don't have the huge, superstar players or even a bunch of decent players, what are you really going to do? Their offense has been good. Their offense has done its job. It may not have been incredible against Birmingham, but it's done enough to win games. The defense hasn't. When you're allowing over 300 yards a game when most other teams are struggling to hit that mark, that's really bad. I mean, there hasn't only been a few 300-yard performances, and 2 of them were against the Renegades. So the Renegades' defense is a massive flaw, and they need to fix that ASAP. They only have so long to actually, work with this. They're 0-2. They've already lost a conference game. This is not a good start for them. You need to get a W this week. Again, they have the offensive talent to be good. It's just that their defense is so skeptical. And their offense, it's not like the Panthers, where the Panthers' defense is just so incredible it can carry any offense. The offense is great, but it's not Panthers' defense good. It can only do so much. It's not even Roughnecks' defense good. It's just that, the Renegades still are able to keep these games close enough because their defense isn't that bad. It's bad, but it's not, giving up 400 yards a game. Look, all I know is this defense needs to get fixed now. Whether that be getting a big signing or something else, they need to fix it quickly. Now, number 5 is going to be the St. Louis Battlehawks. I have no idea what the online community, this is the one I'm talking about. I genuinely believe it's because of a unconscious St. Louis bias, because of the fact that they are such a great market. Look, in no way should this team be number 3 in the power rankings, okay? Unless you think the Brahmas are a fluke and you have them down at 5, then sure, I can buy the Battlehawks at 3. But doing that is insane because you're saying the Brahmas are a fluke. That's the only argument. Look, if you want to do the head-to-head argument, they lost to the Panthers. Panthers better. You want to do the game-per-game basis. The Stallions barely beat the Panthers. The Panthers barely beat the Battlehawks. The Renegades got crushed in the second half against the Stallions. The Battlehawks barely beat the Renegades. What does that lead to? That leads to the ranking of those 4 teams being Stallions 1, Panthers 2, Battlehawks 3, and then Renegades 4. You want to do team versus team? The Battlehawks offense is great. It got absolutely outclassed for most of the game against the Panthers defense. The Battlehawks defense hasn't been that incredible. It got gashed by Panthers offense that just got stalled by the Stallions defense. At this point, there is no argument, in my opinion, that the Battlehawks are better than the Panthers. They can prove it this next week. If the Panthers lose, the Battlehawks win, then yes, we can say that. But if we're saying through 2 weeks of the UFL season, the Panthers are a better team than the Battlehawks. I personally believe it is wherever you put the Panthers, the Battlehawks are one below it. Wherever you justifiably think the Panthers deserve to be, right below them are the Battlehawks. That's how it has to be, in my opinion. The fact that I'm seeing some people are putting like the Panthers 5 and the Battlehawks 3, that's crazy. People seem to have not remembered that, yes, it was a last-second field goal that the Panthers beat the Battlehawks, but the whole game, the Panthers were the better team. The Panthers got a penalty on themselves, which gave the Battlehawks a free first down instead of a fourth down conversion, which is how they got one of their touchdowns. So one of their touchdowns was on a penalty by the Panthers. So it's not like the Battlehawks, were steamrolling the Panthers and then a last-second play beat them, especially because I'm seeing some people justify the Shogoats being a bottom 4 team in the league, or bottom 3 team, I should say, because they failed the last 2 minutes of a game. I mean, it's just, the logic for the Battlehawks being at 3 that I'm seeing makes no sense, because it's completely counterproductive compared to the points they made before. Like with me putting the Renegades where I did last week, it was because they kept it close at halftime against the Stallions. Yet now it's, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if you play the Stallions, it's just did you win? Battlehawks are 5. So let's actually go into the depth. That was my little rant out of the way. The Battlehawks against the Renegades were the better team in my opinion. This is a lot closer than it arguably should have been. Look, Marcel Aitman, in my opinion, is the OPOY candidate right now. I forgot to mention, I think Reuben Foster's the DPOY candidate. Forgot to say that. But Marcel Aitman, so far, is the Offensive Player of the Year candidate. And hell, you could argue the MVP candidate. Okay, McCarron's been great, but Marcel Aitman's been just outshining everybody on this Battlehawks team. Okay, clutch catch after clutch catch. I mean, he had another 55-yarder. I mean, a 53-yarder technically because of where he caught it. 2 TDs. He was incredible. Mateo Durant, really good. Look, I said it before the season. Wayne Gallman had to adjust to the spring football. Could he? Some people said it was crazy for me to say that. I will say, I was wrong about Mateo Durant, but I was right about Gallman, it looks like. Now, granted, it's only been 2 weeks, but Durant looked really good. Even if you get rid of his 41-yard long, again, I'm being, fair to, all the DC fans. Get rid of his 41-yard long. That's still 13 attempts for over 60 yards. That's still an incredible game. Mateo Durant was a baller. He was incredible. A.J. McCarron, he looked really, really good. I think Luis looked a bit better, in my opinion, but A.J. McCarron still looked incredible. He still proved why he is an elite quarterback. Again, they got the win. A lot of bad play by the Renegades and the missed field goal, the coaching decision late in the game, but the Battlehawks still got the W. The Battlehawks were able to keep up with them in sacks. In fact, their sacks were actually bigger impact plays, 7 more yards. They were able to have more, yards off the TFLs despite having 1 less. They were able to, even though they were kind of bad at third down percentage, they were able to go 2 of 3 on fourth down. They were the more disciplined team, only 2 penalties versus 6. Battlehawks won this game. They deserve to move up to 5. Now, their biggest weakness is also defense. This one's not nearly as bad as the Renegades, but it's still bad. 36 points allowed is tied for 6th or essentially tied for a bottom 2. Worse was the Renegades, and then they're tied for the next spot. 7th in yards allowed. Now they're 5th in pass and 6th in rush. So they're not truly horrid in either. It's just that they're not good at either. And then again, it's very much like the Renegades. They just don't do turnovers. They have 2 picks, but they have no forced fumbles, which is like that whole bottom stat line is basically the exact same as the Renegades, believe it or not. But yeah, their defense is better than the Renegades, but it still is very weak. Again, like I said, the fact is the Panthers were able to gash this defense when they used Wes Hills, yet Wes was able to do basically nothing against the Stallions' defense, which does show some of the weakness that this Battlehawks defense does have. Again, I said their rush defense looked pretty poor. Again, they're averaging almost 100 rush yards a game allowed. That's not a good stat. So, their defense is a very big question mark. If they can get that fixed, they can, get a bit better. That'd help them out a lot. But at the moment, Battlehawks defense is their biggest weakness. Their offense looked really good. Mateo Duran has made their running back issue not look like an issue. Their passing attack wasn't an issue. Their O-line looked a lot better. Like I said, I didn't want to overly judge whether or not the Battlehawks offensive line was terrible or if it was just the Panthers D-line. That's why I didn't, harp on it too much. At least as of right now, it seems to be the Panthers D-line was just way better than the Battlehawks O-line, but the Battlehawks O-line isn't bad. So that's a good sign, but their weakness is their defense. Now, the next team is number 4, the Panthers. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious by saying that wherever the Panthers go, the Battlehawks are right behind them. I'm putting the Panthers at 4. This was really close. I was thinking about should they move up to 3? Should the Battlehawks go to 4? And I was like, no. Very much like the next team I'm going to talk about. The one caveat is red zone efficiency. The Stallions went 1 of 6. Yes, this is incredible red zone defense by the Panthers. At the same time, you let a team get in the red zone 6 times. That is really bad. If the Stallions score those touchdowns, this game is not close. The Panthers had a chance to win the game, or at least tie it. They had a drive going at the end, and then they got sacked. And the worst part is the Stallions were giving them penalties. So that's the main reason why I'm keeping them at 4. That final drive was very much aided by the Stallions, not the Panthers playing good. There was a big difference. Yes, the Showboats promise I'll get to. Yes, there was one play that was very much the Showboats not playing good. But this whole drive pretty much was the Stallions just handing yards. Oh, here's a 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness. Oh, here's another penalty for roughing the passer. You're welcome. That's 30 free yards. What do you do with it, Michigan? Nothing. Yikes. Yeah, Michigan did not look great. They allowed 7 sacks, and they didn't even get 1 this week. They went from terrorizing A.J. McCarron to getting literally no sack. They only had 4 TFLs. Yeah, time possession, the Stallions were... when I said that 3 of the 4 games, you could argue the better team ended up, losing. This is the one that wasn't, because the Panthers were the worst team. E.J. Perry still does not look all that good. And what's scaring me, if you did not watch the USFL last year, you did not have the displeasure of watching what the Panthers did at quarterback. So, quick summary of what the Panthers did last year as a Panthers fan. As you saw in the intro, I was wearing the New Jersey I got for my birthday. The Panthers basically last year started Josh Love. He had that incredible week 1 game, and then basically right after that, not good. He had one other great week later in the season, but immediately after he wasn't good. Instead of benching him and letting Carson Strong play a game or something, they would do these kind of halfway benches where they would put Love on the bench for 2 drives and then immediately put Carson Strong back out there. They never gave Strong a legit shot at the quarterback position, and it infuriated me and a lot of other Panthers fans. Instead of letting our other guy have a full game, have a full week to prepare as the QB1, it was we'd put him in and put him out. And then guess what worked? We finally went with a separate quarterback in week 10 with E.J. Perry, and it worked. And I'm already seeing flashes that we're going to have the same issue again this year, because E.J. Perry got benched for 1 series, Etling immediately fumbled the ball, and then we didn't see him again. Look, I think E.J. Perry has 1 more game. If he plays 1 more game not good, bench him. Let Etling have a week or a half to play quarterback position. Look, E.J. Perry's stats might not be awful, but when you watched it, again, just like week 1, he is not playing great. Especially when one of his passes for 96 yards was on a 53 yards after catch play by Marcus Sims. You realize just how bad Perry's stat line really was. Eliminate that pass to Marcus Sims. You're talking 19 completions for barely 100 yards. Oh my God, that is terrible. You're talking not less than 10. You're talking almost 5 yards of completion is horrid. That's the ultimate captain checkdown right there. So you eliminate that incredible Marcus Sims play, and granted it was a great throw. You eliminate that, Perry looks horrid in the stat sheet. And then the rushing attack. Look, this is another scary thing. West Hills was not great. Again, this is another one of those cases. They're at no point where the Panthers are really down by an amount of points that makes you say, okay, they have to pass, yet they just abandoned the run. 7 attempts for 10 yards. You're not going to instill any fear in that. Your long was 3 yards, that's bad. EJ Perry was your best rusher. Yikes. So these red flags are why I'm keeping them at 4 and not moving them up like other people do. Because it's just, what right do I have to justify it? Yes, they kept this close. But this was a bunch of red flags for a team. Again, the Panthers started really good last year. They were 2-0, and then they immediately just skidded down. Hopefully that isn't the case, but at this moment, the Panthers are at 4. Again, they deserve to be above the Battlehawks. They deserve to be above the Renegades, above those other two teams. But should they be ahead of the teams above them in this ranking? I don't think so. I don't think they've done enough to justify that. So they're at number 4. If they can have a week where E.J. Perry looks like he did against the Maulers, they can have West Hills go back to what he looked like in week 1, they can move up. But as of right now, 4 is where they're going to be. Their biggest weakness is their passing attack. Yeah, you kind of expected this. Look, they're worse than passing yards. 163 passing yards a game is the worst in the league. They are tied for 6th in passing TDs. They have the most sacks taken at 8. Granted, a lot of them are this week, but still, 8 sacks is horrid in 2 games. Tied for 7th or bottom of the league for interceptions thrown at 3. And they are 6th in completion percentage. You're completing less than 60% of your passes. Your pass average is 5.6. You have 1 TD. You have 3 interceptions, 8 sacks. Yikes. And even their passer rating, I didn't write it down. I believe it's 2nd worst in the league. It's just, nah. Nah, this ain't it. And remember, this passer rating is their NFL passer rating, if I'm not mistaken. It's really whack how the UFL did it. Like on Fox, it's like the NFL pass rating stat for, the official stats that the UFL uses. It's college, but they both call them QBR when it's passer rating, and there is a difference. The point is, they're really bad there as well. So, what I want to see is EJ Perry get 1 half this next week. If he plays good, let him keep playing. If he does not play good in that first half, you bench him. Let Etling play the entire rest of the half. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see this, are we going to bench him or are we just going to put a guy in for a couple series? We're not running a 2 QB system. We're legit benching guys for like a drive. That's what I think. Panthers at 4. Number 3, the Memphis Showboats. Look, I saw some people drop this team to like 6 in the power rankings. Like, no, okay? This team was better than the Brahmas in the entire game. Look, yes, a lot of that was because the Brahmas kept shooting themselves in the foot with penalty after penalty after penalty after penalty. And did I forget to mention the other, 18 penalties they had? The Brahmas had 14 penalties for 142 yards. The point is, though, the Showboats were the better team for the whole time. Look, again, just like with the Stallions, red zone inefficiency shot themselves in the foot. They went 1 of 5. If they score 1 of those as a touchdown, it's over. And we're not just talking about they got into the 20 and got stopped. No, when you're seeing field goal distances of 23, 22, and 22, you're talking about 2 or 3 yards away from the end zone, and you say, let's kick it. The biggest one was the fumble. There was a fumble, that last field goal, 9 minutes left, Case just fumbles the ball, they lose 3 yards, and instead of rushing it probably for a touchdown or to go for it in 4th down, they decided to kick it. Yikes. That was bad. So if that doesn't happen, the comeback doesn't happen, the Showboats win. Look, the Showboats were the better team for about 58-ish minutes and lost. Because of their biggest weakness, which we'll get to in a second. But the point is, they were the better team throughout basically the entire game. They do not deserve to be down to 6. The issue is that while they're gelling early on, they can't keep it for a full game. Case was good. He wasn't great. He wasn't as good as Perez or McCarron. 17-31 for 194 yards. A TD, 55 completion percentage. You'd love to see that completion percentage be higher, but it could be worse. Darius Victor looked a bit better, but still didn't look like the Vito we know of last year. Despite them saying T-Will was going to get action, we didn't really see anything. So that was questionable. But overall, the Showboats weren't efficient at third down. They were 33%. You wish that'd be higher. They did obliterate in the time possession at 36 minutes. They were the more disciplined team, but they still lost. Failed in the last 2 minutes. I think 3 is where they should go. I don't think they did anything to justify them falling super far. At the end of the day, for 3 quarters in both the first and second game, they were the clear-cut better team. It's just they've been kind of faltering in the fourth quarter. I don't think that's enough to justify a team dropping to the bottom 3 like I'm seeing some other people put in their power rankings online. No, the Showboats to me are a top 4 team as at this moment. They still have elite high-end talent that is better than pretty much any other team in the league at offense. Not really defense, but offense, high-end talent is just the best. It's just, can they get it to gel? I said before the season, it should take probably 3 or 4 weeks for it to gel. Hopefully this next week is it. Hopefully they actually realize that, hey, maybe stop trying to force Swen to be the running back. 2, just use T-Will. That worked, and then it didn't work because of coaching issues. Just try it 1 week. Hopefully they do. We'll see. Their biggest weakness is the fourth quarter. Yeah, the fourth quarter, man, we hate that enemy. Look, in the fourth quarter against both the Roughnecks and the Brahmas, they have been outscored horrifically. They got outscored by 6 points in week 1 and then by 17 in week 2. A negative 23 point differential in the fourth quarter. It's pretty bad. That's literally worse than other teams across the season through 2 weeks. Yeah, and it's not even just that. It's just that overall they've been getting beat. Total yardage against the Roughnecks, they got almost doubled. Against the Brahmas, they literally got doubled. In terms of just every single statistic, they've just been getting beat. I mean, it's just horrid. I mean, really, like, the Roughnecks had 60 pass yards versus the 30 for the Showboats. The Brahmas had 118 versus the 31 for the Showboats. The Showboats had more penalties. The Brahmas were very undisciplined, but in the fourth quarter, they didn't get a penalty. The Showboats got 1. Versus the Showboats Roughnecks, where both teams only got 1 penalty, but one of them was a 5-yard, the other was a 9-yard penalty. Third down percentage. Granted, the Showboats did beat the Brahmas there, and they did beat the Roughnecks there. But basically everywhere else, I mean, yards per play. Yards per play is a big one. You're talking 1.8 and 3.8 yards per play versus 6.9 and 7.7. Yes, the Roughnecks and Brahmas are throwing the ball. They need to get yardage. But if you know they're throwing, maybe you should stop the throw. Maybe you should actually play good defense. They're just not. In the fourth quarter, they're getting beat, and that's where the issue comes into play. It's just aggravating, right? Like, you're talking about a team that, if it wasn't for the fourth quarter, some people would argue they're the best team in the league. But when both weeks you went out in the fourth quarter and just played terribly, and especially against the Brahmas when a lot of it was the last 2 minutes, but even one of those other TDs was earlier in the quarter, not a good look. No, biggest weakness is the fourth quarter. That enemy, we hate that enemy if you're a Showboats fan. So, Showboats at 3. Number 2 is the San Antonio Brahmas. Yeah, like I said, you could very much justify this team being lower, saying both wins are flukes. But as I said last week, and I'll say it again this week, last year's Brahmas team would have taken the opportunities given to them and thrown them away. The Brahmas would have somehow lost to the defenders who had a player essentially throwing the game, and they would have lost to the Showboats who essentially handed them to the game. This Brahmas team is different. Yes, there was still some questionable coaching decisions at certain points in terms of extra point decisions, but the Brahmas are still a much better coach team than they were last year. Chase Garbers is looking like a legit QB. 1 week is it just a random event? 2 weeks in a row? Okay, you might have something. Now, week 3 is where we'll get the tell. If Chase Garbers is still good this next week, he's legit. As of right now, though, you have to be a bit skeptical, but he still has looked really good through 2 weeks. You could very much make the case he's the MVP through 2 weeks. You could make that case. I personally would say Marcel Aitman, believe it or not, but Chase Garbers has looked really good through 2 weeks. He did have 1 interception, but the last quarter he was balling out. 287 yards, 3 TDs. Just that fourth quarter he had was incredible. The rest of the game, the fourth quarter, really good. Again, the issue was the penalties. They got a ton of penalties, almost 150 yards of penalties. They won by 1 point. They had a great fourth quarter. Rushing the ball, really bad. Lovett, McFarland, yikes. Now, granted, the difference is that this team actually was playing from behind most of the game. No, playing behind by 8 points is not throw the ball out. It is still run the ball. This team was down by multiple scores throughout a lot of the game. And they were able to go down the field when it mattered in the fourth quarter, or let me rephrase that, in the final 2 minutes, and get the job done. I did a whole in-depth review on their final 2 drives. If you want to click the top right of this video, you can go see it, where I basically go in-depth on what happened and how they were able to pull it off. It was incredible. Yes, they were the worst team throughout the day. Yes, they should not have won this game, but they did. They were able to get the W and squeeze out a victory, and I think they deserve to be above the Showboats. They got the job done when it mattered, despite shooting themselves in the foot throughout the entire first 3 quarters. Brahmas at number 2. Their biggest weakness is penalties. Look, it wasn't just this week. Even last week, they had over 60 yards of penalties. So, I mean, when you look at this, I had to put the Roughnecks there because this shows just how undisciplined this team is. Almost 100 more yards of penalties in 2 weeks is unbelievable. You're talking 212 penalty yards versus 127. Look, almost no team is even averaging that many passing yards a game, and they have that many in penalty yards through 2 games. Look, if it wasn't for penalties, they could have kept this game like really close, and they could have probably had a decent lead. Instead, they were just getting constant penalties. It was really bad. That's simply the issue. Get more discipline. Stop doing stupid stuff. If you get better at, not being idiotic and doing stupid penalties, guess what? You're probably going to win these games and make it a lot easier on yourselves. So hopefully they can fix that, because that 212 yards is really bad. But hey, hopefully they can fix it. But that's their biggest weakness, is penalties, being undisciplined. Because the fact is, nothing else on their team is really that bad. Yes, they allowed a lot of yardage from the Showboats, but they did stop them in the red zone. Yes, their running game was pretty bad this week, but it still wasn't horrid. And if you have a passing attack that's working as well as they do, their biggest weakness is penalties. Number 1, the Birmingham Stallions. What can I actually say? I mean, if they don't lose, they're number 1. I mean, come on. This team has basically for like maybe 4 weeks across all of the Ultramodern spring football have they not been the best team in spring football. Look, their quarterbacks aren't even playing good and they're still winning these games. Like I said, when you look at the stats, the cold hard stats, they obliterated Michigan. 100 more yards, 15 more minutes time of possession, 7 more sacks, 4 more TFLs. It's just red zone inefficiency, and their quarterback were the only reason this game was close. This team is so loaded that they don't even need quarterbacks to play good. They just have to have them play If they play kinda good, just mediocre, that's good enough. CJ Maribel, most underrated player in the USL the past couple seasons, once again was solid. Yes, he'd have the 19-yard run that made his average go up, but again, they used him a lot. Ricky Person also wasn't technically that good, but they still used him a lot. They're the best team in spring football. But they do have a weakness. Their passing offense is pretty bad. You could very much make the case, because this is really worse than the Panthers. Look, they might not be the worst in yards per game at 183.5, but they're tied with the Panthers for 3 interceptions thrown, but they're worst in passer rating and they're worst in completion percentage. 50 completion percentage is terrible. And the thing is, they're going to continue the 2 QB system, which I don't know if I agree or disagree at this point, because it's week 1. Martinez looked really bad throwing the ball when he was throwing, but looked great running. Corral in the second half looked great throwing. This week, Martinez just looked like the better quarterback, except in the red zone, it looked like he had no idea what he was doing. Really weird. I still think they have a quarterback that I think they probably should put as the backup or the starter in Jamar Smith, but hey, that's just a theory, a game theory. But okay, the point is, their offense, the passing attack is the question mark. Do they keep doing the 2 QB system? It can work. Despite what people try to say, it was working for the Generals. The Luis Perez, DeAndre Johnson was working. It was just an injury, and then not playing him at all in the playoff game is what doomed him. It did work. It can work. It's just you got to get them better at actually throwing. The whole reason that 2 QB system worked with the Generals wasn't just because, they had, Darius Victor, Trey Williams. It was because they were both efficient. When you looked at their completion percentage, their passer rating, their TD interception ratio, it was incredible. That's why it works, because you had two efficient quarterbacks, but one of them was far better running the ball, and one of them was just a little bit better at efficiency and getting the ball where it needed to be. That's why it worked. This can work. It's just, as of now, it's not. You only have so much time to make it work, but when you have a 2-0 start like this, hey, if you do end up losing a game or two, it's not going to hurt you when you're 2-0. It's going to hurt you if, lose 4 straight, or, end the season going like 2-6 like the Panthers did last year. But Stallions are 2-0. They looking really fine. Passing attack's the only weakness. So that'll do it for my Week 3 UFL Power Rankings. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with my rankings. And what teams do you agree or disagree with? Like I said before, I think the Battlehawks being at 3 is crazy. There's no reason to justify them being that high in my opinion. I think that's some of the DC love that people are giving, saying they're the 6th. No, I get it. They won a game, the Renegades didn't. But when your only wins against the Roughnecks and the Renegades kept it very close against the Battlehawks and literally had a tie game at the half, which only was because of a deep shot random play the Stallions had at half. I don't know. That's my thinking. Subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to become a channel member and support the channel, it's as little as $1 a month. You get exclusive video every month that is not about the UFL, as well as many other perks. If you want to do that, there's a join button as well as a link in the description. And as always, have a great night.